It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
No one in the property industry working in Melbourne needs another lunch or another drink. There are people out on the streets who need it more. So a Home for All was kind of the obvious place for us to donate because it is a property industry initiative.
Now, many experiencing housing instability are being forced to couch surf or sleep in their cars. The Guardian, in fact, profiled a woman named Lisa, now in her mid-50s, who lives in her caravan because she couldn't afford rental housing on a disability pension. Divorced women, we've talked about this in the past, particularly those with children, they are struggling to re-enter the housing market because of the lost shared income. Experts warn that many of these women may never own a home again and will be forced to remain renters indefinitely, largely due to housing prices and limited borrowing capacity. Now, according to Homelessness Australia, the number of women and girls seeking homelessness support has jumped by 20%, and much of this is attributed to rising rents, domestic violence, and a lack of housing options. Homelessness services also report that they are overwhelmed. Many can't keep up with demand, and some people fall through the cracks entirely. You always knew that homelessness was an issue, but after learning that rough sleepers make up about 6% of homelessness in Australia and that many people sleep during the day because the nights are too dangerous, you decided to do something about it. And good morning to you.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, look, we at Savvy Communications work very closely in the property industry and have seen over the years the rising issue of homelessness and affordability across the board. I think it was, 6% sleep rough, but it was more than 94% that, you don't know about. So 6% are sleeping rough, but 94% are hiding it. As you said, sleeping in their cars, sleeping on couches, sleeping, couch surfing through people's homes. The homelessness number, 6% are visible, 94% really keep it a secret. And that's a really shocking statistic because when you walk around the streets of Melbourne, we see the 6%, we're not seeing the other 94 who are in just as much trouble and may very well end up right alongside those 6%. For us, that statistic was really, really shocking.
The stat of 122,000 Australians homeless on any given night and 1 in 10 at risk. I mean, the crisis suddenly is very deep, and it touched you and your staff because this is really great of what you guys are doing. Instead of hosting your usual end-of-year celebration, you and your 32-strong team have decided to donate your Christmas party budget. And we'd love a few more people to, even if it was half your Christmas budget, it's going to make a bit of a dent.
Yeah, look, it sure is. A Home for All was a foundation that was started by the property sector in Australia, and it's backed by REA Group. That was they've got a really strong initiative at the moment to try and raise $1 million, which has actually happened. That $1 million has been raised. But for us, it was something quite obvious. We were planning our Christmas party. We have a really big bash every year and sort of quite infamous in Melbourne. But we sort of looked at each other and said, you know what, something doesn't feel right. No one in the property industry working in Melbourne needs another lunch or another drink. There are people out on the streets who need it more. So a Home for All was kind of the obvious place for us to donate because it is a property industry initiative. It will go to the right charities to help the right people. And it's a shout out to all our clients, all our suppliers, all our customers to say, look, you don't have to do your whole Christmas party. Maybe just donate personally the Uber fare that you would have spent coming to our party. Every dollar makes a difference. You don't need a huge bag of cash, just a teaspoon will go far enough. If everyone does their little bit, we can really help the people who are living out there on the streets.
Now, as I say, Victoria is about to introduce the latest 5 reforms from the state's 150 rental rule changes since 2021. Perhaps just talk those through because quite a lot of news to get through here.
There is, and here in Victoria, we have a number of new reforms that came in yesterday here in Victoria that are great news. The big one, I think, is that any notice now for a reason to vacate or a notice of a rent increase must be made at least 90 days in advance. In the past, it was 60 days. We know it's really hard even to organise a holiday with 60 days, let alone uproot your life and move to a new house. So that's a great improvement for renters. Rental properties must now meet minimum standards when they're advertised. So if the property's not up to scratch, it's no longer okay to put that property on the market. The work needs to be done to meet some pretty basic minimum standards before it's listed for rent. Mandatory smoke alarm checks must be done every year now. That's been a law for a number of years in properties where leases are started after March 2021, but now it will apply to all properties. And there are lots of rules now to protect renters' personal information. We know that our information is really critical to be kept private. We don't want it to be shared in a range of places. And this law requires property managers to take steps to ensure that that information is kept safe. I think the big one, though, is the ban on no-fault evictions. And up until yesterday, it was possible for people to be issued with a notice to vacate the property for no reason. That's pretty unreasonable. And now rental providers need to give the reason why they want the person to leave.
Time to have a look at what the investors and the landlords are saying, because I do note that the investor groups argue that the reforms add pressure to landlords and contribute to investor withdrawals from the Victorian market. Concerns, they say, include poor communication of policy, increased compliance requirements, and rising regulatory costs. What do you say about that?
Here in Victoria, we talk about renting as part of a consumer market. So I think my response to that is a pretty basic one. If you're providing a product to a customer, then it needs to be fit for purpose. And we now have some rules in place that determine what fit for purpose looks like in rented homes. Let's, I think, all agree that having a home is a pretty fundamental and essential thing for all of us to achieve. While there may be additional compliance, there might have been poor communication. I think they're all things that happen to us all as we are trying to improve a system. 30% of us rent our homes. It's a large consumer group, if you want to keep on with that metaphor. And so it's reasonable that the products that are being offered into that market are fit for purpose and good quality.
Yes, and just before I let you go, bond transfer legislation. Now, what does that mean if you are a tenant? Well, it allows tenants to move their existing bond from their current rental to the next, reducing upfront costs during relocation. This is something that you guys, I think, fought for pretty hard, was it?
We did fight for this pretty hard. It's one of those facts of life for renters that you have to come up with another $2,000 or $3,000 upfront every time you want to move house to pay the next bond. And it will be a thing of the past soon. It will be possible for renters to opt into the portable bond scheme and be able to essentially transfer the bond between their previous property and their next property. One of the interesting things we'll be looking for is if there's a reduction in the churn in the rental market because there will be no reason notices to vacate. That's going to be an interesting thing that will also have an impact on people not needing to stump up for an extra bond.
So really interesting that you're saying that there is a cautiousness with maybe 50% of people turning up to bid. What is the through line there, Chris? What is the commonality with those buyers being cautious? Why is that?
Look, I think there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's the cautiousness by going, well, this is a property that I want to buy. Is it going to tick all the boxes? And a lot of the buyers are saying, no, it's not going to tick all the boxes. So they're not going to go fighting tooth and nail to get the property. Where back when it was COVID numbers, there were less properties. So they were really shooting and going hard for those homes, knowing that the market was increasing. So what we're seeing out there is buyers, and they're simply saying it to us, well, if I can get it for the right price, we'll buy it. Well, what's that right price? So that they've determined where they see value on that property before they attend, which is fine, that's normal. But when they're getting there, there's just that hesitation by, well, if I don't get this one, there's another one around the corner. I'll go buy that property. We'll go have a shot at that. So I think there's a lot of cautiousness in the wind by the amount of stock now on the marketplace, which is very interesting, especially in particular suburbs, upper North Shore and lower North Shore numbers. But then the second part of it, it's at that time of the year now where we'll just wait until next year. We're not really too fussed whether we buy now or later.
So buyers at the moment, are you saying that there is an advantage, like it's a buyer's market? And the second part to that is the conditions and terms, because when there is more stock on the market, buyers can put in more terms. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. We're seeing more properties being pushed back. So scheduled, say, for instance, the 29th of November, then they're pushing the property back because there's a lack of interest on the home. So agents are pushing them back, which just shows that there's just no interest on the home. So they're pushing the properties back for them to be able to try and gain some more momentum. The buyers themselves at the moment, the choices that they've got is extraordinary. If you're looking for a duplex in the Ryde and surrounding suburbs, there's a significant amount of properties to choose from. A lot of those buyers are going, well, maybe I'll just hold back and wait to see what happens early next year. The terms on the contracts, they're not going through the roof, as in they're not expecting too much, but some of them are expecting to have longer settlements.
That whole rationale, it's a real thing, isn't it, for buyers to work out, because there's so many of these auctions happening in Sydney. You must sort of strike this where people say, gee, I just can't get to your auction, Chris. There are a few of these other auctions that I need to go to. How much of a problem is that, from an auctioneering point of view?
It's not a real problem. The reason around that, COVID did teach us a lot of lessons for agents and for auctioneers, knowing that Saturday is not only the biggest day of the week these days in regards to auctions. It's still a great day for auctions. However, agents and also vendors and auctioneers are more open to every day during the week, midweek auctions and also Sunday auctions. The amount of properties that are just specifically on Saturday are still really strong, and it is the main day. However, as I mentioned, everyone's open to other days, which seemingly show really good strength. On Sundays, last year we had a 100% clearance rate. This year for Sunday auctions, we're still sitting at a 79% clearance rate for every auction that we've conducted. So still really strong stats. For the midweek auctions, they're just really relaxed rather than your Saturday where you just mentioned, Craig, a buyer's going, well, what time are we going to start? Let's go. I've got another auction to go to. And they're already preparing to miss out on a couple of homes and wanting to go to 2 or 3 or 4 auctions any given day.
Grab your weekly dose of inspiration to help build a real estate portfolio. We talk to the best in the business every day. Learn from the professionals and know your property with us.
Right, let's go to Sydney and catch up with Erin Kitson, who is a director from S&P Global Ratings, because they have their latest quarterly report on Australian home loan arrears. And the Australian market seems to be holding steady, with arrears expected to stay low as interest rates pause. So tell us a little bit about that.
So in terms of, what this report shows, it really provides, I suppose, a household pulse check on how households are managing debt serviceability through metrics like loans in arrears. And what the report, or the latest report, shows is that loans in arrears still remain low. And despite the fact that interest rates now look like they're going to be on hold for a while, we think arrears are still likely to remain low, but probably not going to go any lower while interest rates stay at these levels.
Yes, just in terms of those rate cuts or those rate rises, how quickly does the arrears sort of respond to those?
Yeah, look, in Australia, because Australia is a mostly variable rate mortgage market, unlike places like America, where most mortgages are fixed rate, any changes in interest rates are reflected in arrears relatively quickly. So, within 3 to 4 months. And there's a close connection between arrears movements and interest rate movements.
And investor lending, that seems to be speeding up as property momentum builds. It is a subject matter that we have been covering now for months, with the way that investors really in a couple of these sweet spot markets have been amplifying their portfolio. History does show too that when prices rise, investors jump in, adding even more fuel onto the market. You've got a little bit of that information in your report this morning.
Now, investor lending growth has certainly picked up. And if you look at the latest mortgage lending growth statistics, investor lending now makes up about 40% of new lending, which is quite high. And obviously that has spillover effects to property markets because, it adds a lot more momentum there. I think what will be interesting though, Craig, to see is, we've got not only investor lending growth picking up, but we've also got a number of first homeowner guarantee schemes as well, which is helping pick up first homeowner demand. So you've got forces occurring at the same time.
And before we get to the breakout in the suburbs, what I'm going to be really interested in looking at 12 months on, this time next year when your report comes out, because of that 5% guarantee scheme, that is going to be very interesting to see where the arrears land.
Correct. I think one of the things that the guarantee scheme does, it enables borrowers, particularly first homeowners, to take on more debt. Now, when you take on more debt relative to your income, it does make you more vulnerable to falling into mortgages arrears if there's an interest rate rise or an economic slowdown in, other cycles. So I think, depending what happens on the economic front, with more higher debt to income lending potentially coming through with these schemes. So with more higher debt to income lending potentially for borrowers taking advantage of these schemes, this could make a cohort of borrowers more sensitive to arrears, higher arrears in the future.
We are your local source for unbiased, expert insights into the world of real estate. We are not a real estate company. Our only objective is to help you better understand the real estate market. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.